The amount of hopelessness in prison is astounding and is supported by every single statistic that you can find in reference to incarceration. The hope for succeeding post-release is absent for a majority of those inside. Incarceration does create poverty. Incarceration does create hopelessness. Incarceration does divide families. The hope of getting out of prison has to change to the hope of staying out of prison. Meeting the immediate needs of the recently released is important, but it is vital to focus on their long-term growth. It's critical that they can envision a successful future and have a realistic path to achieve those goals. Brand 316 was started with that in mind. Brand 316 is a Christian ministry focused on stopping the revolving door of incarceration through Christ-centered personal, professional, and spiritual development and training for the formerly incarcerated. Incarceration has increased the U.S. poverty rate by an estimated 20%. That's over 7.5 million Americans it affects. Employment and recidivism are directly related. 600,000 inmates are released every single year. Approximately 50% of those, so 300,000, identify as Christians. Now, that does not mean they're followers. That does not mean they are reading the Bible daily. But that means when they went to jail at their worst moment, they filled out a form and identified as Christian. To me, that's hope. Employment and recidivism, again, are directly related. The national recidivism rate is nearly 70%. It's 67%. 85% of those rearrested were unemployed. The ones that were employed, the recidivism rate was only 9%. Brand 316 is focused on Christ-centered training, mentorship, and, I don't know what it's doing. There we go. Christ-centered training, mentorship, and life skills. Comprehensive reintegration that is training for 52 weeks, which we'll go over. Job training and immediate employment when they're released. Changing the perceptions is also a big deal. So the perceptions of society and the church is very negative towards the formerly incarcerated. And that's something that has to be changed and it has to be addressed. Amen. Christ-centered path to long-term success. And it's creating a theme of thinking in the long term and not thinking short term. And our training is all about that. Lastly, every single decision we make is focused on the scalability of this. So this is a program that has to be scalable in the sense that we can plant it in any city in America and probably the world with a program that's easy to follow, that people can literally jump in and understand how to teach it and how to start creating that mindset. I chose the number 316 for several reasons. Conveniently, Wichita 316 is the area code. More importantly, when growing up, my dad, sometimes after long trips, would work from home. I, being the child I was, would like to help and be the assistant. So I'd sometimes dial phone numbers for him. So I remember dialing 316, and it was probably calling Al word or something like that. And I always related 316 with John 3:16. I then went through the Bible and started in Genesis 3:16, which is the original sin and pain birth, to Revelations 3:16, which it says you cannot be cold, lukewarm, you have to be either hot or cold. Then John 3:16 we obviously know. 2 Timothy 3:16, the scripture is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training. Teaching and admonishing in Colossians 3:16, and so on. It was convenient that the area code of Wichita is 3:16. Currently, there's over 2 million people in prison. That's a 500% increase over the last 4 decades. More than 95% of them will be released. Criminal records are common. So this is something with perception. 1 out of every 4 Americans has a criminal record. Over 80 million Americans have one. Very likely, and I'm pretty much 100% sure, within your congregation, no matter where you are, you have people attending that have criminal records, and that is something you need to know because it's something that should be addressed. People of color make up 40% of the U.S. population, but 67% of the prison population. 49% of black males, 44% of Hispanic males, 40% of white males are arrested at least once before their 23rd birthday. Incarceration does create generational poverty, also focuses on poverty. Adults in poverty are 3 times more likely to be arrested, and importantly, 15 times more likely to be charged with a felony. Why is that important? A felony carries longer sentences. A felony carries heavier fines. And despite what many people believe, court fines, child support, while you're locked up, that doesn't go away. You still owe those. So you're already in poverty, you'll leave prison, and you're in more debt and still in poverty. And then if you can't pay it, your end result is not following the terms and going back to prison. Children of incarcerated people have 6 times more, the children are 6 times more likely to become incarcerated themselves. You would change one man through this program. That's a direct effect for his children and his children's children. 49% of federal inmates have a child aged 20 or younger. And most importantly, a family's probability of being poor is 40% higher if the father is incarcerated.
Right.
27% of the formerly incarcerated are unemployed. A study of 50,000 inmates, federal inmates, found that 33% found no employment after 4 years post-release. 40% at any given time were unemployed, and the people who did find jobs averaged about a job a year over those 4 years. 92% of businesses run background checks. If you run a background check on somebody and you see they have a criminal record, that's an issue when you're hiring them. And a lot of people get through the interview process, get to the background check, and then they're not allowed to get hired, or they don't get hired. Another common issue is guys get hired, and then for whatever reason, interest, people Google them, and then find their case on Google, and then tell managers they're not comfortable working with this person because he's a criminal. That's also extremely common. Estimated that 75% of the adult inmates are illiterate. And from what I saw inside, it's extremely accurate and just terrifying within itself that it's at that point. Now, the average American, including you guys, all of you, breaks 3 criminal laws every single day. Every single day. That gives authorities the legal grounds to pursue charges if they choose to. Now, the laughter is common, so I have it there for a reason as well, because for most of you, maybe not all, I have no clue, but for anyone on supervised release, if I break a law, I'm going back to, or potentially going back to prison. That is a weight over my shoulder. There are nearly 5,000 federal statutes and as many as 300,000 regulations that can subject people to possible criminal penalties. And if you are on parole, probation, supervised release, you sign a paper saying you will not break the law. Someone is arrested every 3 seconds in the United States. Every 3 seconds. So I'm always asked for the examples. So I'll just have a few examples of how you break in the law possibly. Sharing your Netflix password with somebody outside of your house. Speeding is obvious. Texting while driving, obvious. Photocopying a textbook, that probably doesn't happen nowadays with the students, but in college, who didn't do that? Prescriptions. You have surgery. 6 months later, your wife has a knee or backache and she borrows a pain pill. Narcotics. Floating a stop sign. Hosting movie night or fight night. Using a fake name online. Running a red light, I like to point out, because I think it's important for everybody to know that you are running one red light away from being incarcerated. And that's true for every single person in here. One bad decision can lead to a horrible life in prison. Immediate challenges for the incarcerated when they're released. The label, first off, of the formerly incarcerated and being formerly incarcerated is powerfully negative. You have already been branded and judged by society. And most people do not want to give you a second chance. Hopelessness was shocking to me within prison. The amount of people that want to get out is high, of course. Nobody wants to be in prison. They can't wait to get out and eat real food and see their wife or girlfriend or be with their family, be with their kids. They cannot wait for that. And it's always followed by, I hope I stay out a long time this time. It was so common and I never understood it. And I would ask and say, well, why would you say that then? Because you don't know the system yet. Once you get out, you'll see. And that was common. That was common from several people I talked to often. The shock of freedom, and unfortunately, by the way, the statistics all prove that. The statistics prove that they're right. The shock of freedom is also very real. The things that you don't expect when you get out. is, I mean, the best example was my wife graciously, when she picked me up, had it planned out that we're going to go to the grocery store. After 4 years, the grocery store sounded like a phenomenal idea, and it was a great idea for good food. For me, coming out of prison, coming from an environment where if somebody walks behind you quickly, you either need to stand, you get ready to fight, is quite easily the way to say it. It's going to be an issue because you know that that's going to happen. If you walk behind somebody in prison and they don't know, it will cause issues. You have to say, hey, coming behind you. Something like that. So going to the grocery store was a great idea, but walking in there and the busyness of it, and the people willing to walk right by you and talk, and even talking to you, because you don't do that in prison. You don't talk to random people that you don't know, because you don't know what their crime is. You don't know what their status is within their own group. So you just don't do that. Also, when released, there's no support network, and support networks wean after time. Family is thrilled when you get out of prison, until real life kicks in for them again. And then it's a lot harder. So long-term support networks are vital. No employment. Employment is one of the biggest issues when people are released. Transportation is a huge issue. Housing. If you try to get housing, you have to apply. You have to tell them that you have a criminal record, and people can choose to not accept you, and they have the right to do that. If you have a family member that you're going to go to when you're released from prison, and they don't tell their landlord, and they have to tell the landlord that you are coming from prison, the landlord can say, no, you can't live there. And they won't be able to do that, or get kicked out. Society is also just, in general, unwilling to forgive. Where does the church stand? So, the first thing is, I believe in my heart that the church wants to help. I think the church is unsure how to help. The church is fearful to help. The church is afraid of the possible consequences of bringing a criminal to your congregation, and what if something bad happens? Some churches, unfortunately, I've seen are unwilling. The other part that I think is vital for everybody here to understand is you have, I would be shocked if you do not have members of your congregation that have a family member in prison or recently released, or a friend that is currently incarcerated. I talked to one person, obviously you won't mention who, but when it happened, their son is in there, and when it happened, the shame, they just don't talk about it in church, because they'll get frowned upon, they'll get judged. Right. So you get judged by your son's actions, and obviously my family probably went through that as well. So there's a lot of things with the church. So there are three common views when it comes to perceptions that I think. So there's three common when it comes to society and the church with the formerly incarcerated. The first is you trust the system. You trust the process. You trust the prosecutors and the punishment. You know it's not perfect, but you know it's pretty close. The second person or group is you do not trust the system at all. You think it has major flaws, targets specific groups, has unethical representatives, and is relatively unchecked. The third person, you generally trust the system. You know it has several flaws, but little can be done to fix it, and really it has little to no impact on your life, with a little asterisk, until it does. All viewpoints point, in my view, all viewpoints point to forgiveness and facilitating. If you trust the system, I have paid my debt to society, I have been rehabilitated, I should be accepted with arms wide open and given a real chance to succeed. If you do not trust the system, I need every ounce of help I can get. If you feel like little can be done, there really is a ton that can be done to make a real difference in the lives of so many. Obviously, Romans 8:28, and we all know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. I also always want to remind everybody, we all sin, we all fall short of the glory of God. God uses our past failures for His glory. Moses was a murderer. Moses fled the law for 40 years and then went back, and God used him to lead the people out of Israel. King David, we all know about him. Solomon. Paul wanted to stop Christianity before it was a thing. I mean, it was a thing, but you know what I mean. There are several other examples. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Our target market, and from a marketing past, I always brand things as target market and stuff. So our target market with Brand 316 members are people that are within 2 to 3 years of being released or are very recently released. Followers of Christ is important. And we have verification methods, which I'll go over in a minute. Go through an intense application process. After this presentation or we're done, I encourage you to go through the packets that they have a cover letter thanking you for coming. They have a letter that we would send to the inmates that are currently in prison explaining Brand 316. They have the 10-page application process, which will take them hours to complete. And it goes down to the details of things they will not want to discuss, they will not be happy to discuss. So I would highly suggest checking that out after. They also commit to 12 months of very intense reintegration training. Within that packet also is a 52-week guide for reintegration and career training. It's a week-by-week schedule that you yourself can see what the guys will be going through on a weekly basis as a member of Brand 316. They commit to real-world career training. So that is something much different than job training. That is getting them to start thinking about the long term, a career. Commit to 12 months of weekly Bible studies, attending churches, and church attendance. They're provided, and I've talked to a few companies, one is fully committed, that they are provided a job immediately upon release that pays above minimum wage, that provides health insurance, as long as they commit to 12 months, which is, if they're a part of our program, they're going to commit to 12 months. The benefit to the business is they have stable employees over a 12-month period. For us, they get income immediately. And then that also ties in with the training of how to handle money, the financial lessons, all of that kind of stuff. The reintegration support provides a safe and consistent support network over time. It's Christ-focused mentorship and maturity. It's short and long-term goal setting. Trauma counseling is vital for this as well. One thing that always stands out to me, anyone that's been in prison has gone through trauma, and probably trauma prior to prison. One thing that stands out to me the most was while I was in about, I don't know, it was probably 8 to 12 months in. It was in San Bernardino County. They were transport. I was on the first floor. There was a second floor. They were transporting an inmate up the stairs. The inmate, hands cuffed behind him. The guard is supposed to hold the handcuffs all the way up, unlock the door while holding the handcuffs, put them in the cell, lock the cell, and then undo the handcuffs with the door. That's procedure. For whatever reason, I was on the first floor right below the steps. They transported the person upstairs. It was 7:15 in the morning. I heard a scream, and then all of a sudden it sounded like a watermelon just crashing right in front of my cell door. The inmate fell over the railing, head first, handcuffs behind, so they couldn't block the floor whatsoever. Died immediately. And the blood, I just absolutely can never forget that sound of really like a watermelon being dropped, and the blood seeping underneath the door.
Oh, wow.
That's the kind of stuff that happens. That specific situation probably not as often, but there's so much trauma within prison. Also with reintegration is learning basic life skills and accountability, basic financial planning. One example with the financial planning, I mean, we have 52 weeks of it, but one of the bigger steps that a lot of people, just to get a better understanding of what they're going through, setting up a bank account is a big deal for somebody that's been in prison more than once or even in once. Because if they get rearrested, if they set up that bank account, that's committing to a long-term plan in their head. Because if they get rearrested, then the government immediately will seize that towards fines, etc. So there's things like that that we use to help with it. Weekly meetings, fellowship, I kind of already went over. Relationship building and social interactions. Social interactions are very difficult because while you're inside, you don't share with people. You don't have real relationships with anything because everything is a hustle. And redeveloping healthy relationships with family and friends. And long-term, the goal of it is establishing hope, support, successful traits, and realistic long-term goals. With the career training side, the first part is understanding a job versus a career. There's realistic employment training where we know that every single job out there is not for every single person. Some people will have strengths that we'll figure out through the aptitudes and the assessments. And also setting realistic goals. A lot of people's exit plan when they leave prison is they're going to start a business. Starting a business sounds phenomenal. It's difficult. It's difficult to do financially. It's difficult to plan out. It's not an easy thing. So the unrealistic thought that I'm just going to jump out, I'm going to get funding, which many people think that there's grants available for the formerly incarcerated to start a business. So they leave with this hope that's not realistic. So it's really setting realistic hope, realistic goals and expectations so that they know, hey, a year from now I'll be doing good if I hit this benchmark. 2 years from now if I hit this benchmark I'm moving fast, and so on. Vocational and trade schools have apprenticeships that they're willing to take people that are formerly incarcerated. So developing relationships with them and leading them to careers that have a long-term career path, great financial income, and thinking about our IRAs and retirement.
Bluetooth disconnected.
That wasn't me. I've said that once or twice. Real-world preparation is also part of the training. So mock interviews. So we go over that in our program. Dealing with managers, things like that. So really creating individual plans of action where it shows a realistic and clear path to long-term
Bluetooth
success.
connected.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I'll turn it off, Dave.
It's all good.
It's all right, Andy. We love you.
Bluetooth disconnected.
Last time.
I told you it wasn't me. So here's just an example of a weekly, so you'll see it when you look at it in the 52-week plan. This is week 22. So first thing we would do is discuss prior week struggles and victories. We do that every single week. The purpose of this is really to go over what is good, what is bad, and just being able to openly communicate with other people. Also, on this week, it's trauma is real, an open discussion. So really being able to discuss the trauma that they've experienced before and after, and doing it openly, which just shows a huge trust in all the other people within it. Family connections and relationships, that's an open talk. Basic financial lesson, $1 a day is $365. So the purpose of this lesson, just from a basic financial standpoint, is the example used would be if you go and buy, every day you go to the gas station, and you buy a soda on the way to or from work. That Coke is $2.08 at the gas station. If you go and buy a 12-pack at the grocery store, that soda is 50 cents. So that $1.50 a day that you save by just waiting till you get home and planning out that just soda saves you about $500 a year, which for many will be rent for an entire month. Respectful ambition at work, so teaching that it's okay to want to succeed and grow in your employment. And that's something that you can do as long as you do it respectfully. And here it's also the personal interest. So within resumes, doing the personal interest section of a resume. So really helping on the resume writing. Job traits, standing out to managers. So what you can do to stand out in a positive way to your managers. Prison habits are also something that many people don't think about from the outside world. But the prison habits you develop in prison are very useful and really make great employees. So you're used to time management. You're used to doing counts. You're used to having certain moves. Chow time is at a specific time, and if you don't show up, you don't eat. If you're not in your prison cell for count time, you get thrown in solitary confinement. You wake up at 6 a.m. every single day, not by choice, but you wake up at 6 a.m. every day. Lights go out at 10 p.m. every night. Sometimes they even just turn everything off so there's no electricity, like TVs, etc. So the time management side is perfect for any employee. Habits, every single day you're doing the exact same thing over and over because that makes time go by faster in prison. So those habits, creating that type of keeping habits is something very good for employees as well. Self-reliance, optimism, confidence, self-control. Every day in prison you could fight if you want to. Every day you put in some self-control, not fighting. Every day you hear something from a guard, not every day, but most days, some kind of snark comment that makes you want to respond. And you choose through self-control that you know there's going to be consequences, whatever they are, if you do. Patience, there's nothing, I was the most impatient person before prison. You have no idea. Much like my father, likely for whoever's worked with me. So patience was taught to me probably 4 months in when I truly realized, probably sooner than that, but you have no control over your time. If you're supposed to be at court, I missed 2 court dates that they just chose not to bring me to. And the judge yelled and screamed at them for it, but it didn't matter because they're their own system. It's just, and the patience of sitting there, not being able to use the phone until 9 a.m. to call my wife and say, they didn't take me, so you know. And, so things like that, you develop patience throughout the time. So phase one we've kind of gone over, which is the training, the reintegration, the employment. Next part is phase two, which is a self-sustaining nonprofit Christian organization focused on creating for-profit businesses for the formerly incarcerated. So it's focusing on creating low overhead companies that require minimal investment that have high returns. Through partners, we educate them, train them. Through our program, we train them to become entrepreneurs for the correct people. Again, not everybody's going to be good at running a company. Not everybody's going to be good at certain things. So the ones that are right, we will definitely focus on this as well. As a part of the program, so some of the examples is house painting, which has a 30% profit margin. Landscaping averages 35%. Moving company, junk hauling, auto repair. There's dozens and dozens of companies that you can start that have very low overhead. So a painting company, if you wanted to start a one or two man shop, you would really only need an investment of under $5,000. And those companies average about $100,000 a year. So that's one of the angles that you could take. The solution with it is we have the training, we have the reintegration, we have the work, we have the strategic employment placement, and then also 316 businesses. Another part of the program is when people graduate, and the strategic employment placement is really focused, when people graduate our 12-month program, we have developed and will develop relationships with companies that are willing to hire them and give them a chance at a career. So they lose that 12-month job they get immediately, which is already understood with that other company. That's a 12-month commitment. After that, they go to a career that is focused on the long term, a career that shows them that they've been trained for specifically through the program. So then, in closing with this, what I'm asking obviously from the churches and all the pastors is, and really we want to help you guys out too, is the first thing is to refer members of your church who have family or friends that are currently incarcerated or recently released. In the packets, there's postcards. So there's 5 postcards. The business card has my cell phone on there as well for you. The postcards have a web address. The postcards have exactly who our target market is, and it's a way for anybody that has family in prison currently to come contact us. They contact us. We handle everything else. We will contact the inmate. We will send them the packet of information. We'll send them the application. We'll send them training materials. We'll prep them for life on the outside. The reason we target 2 to 3 years out is because that gives us 2 to 3 years out to prepare them for life outside the prison walls, which is dramatically different. If they're recently released, we really want to get in touch with them immediately so that they still have the quote-unquote prison habits. So they still have the time management skills of waking up early and working and going to sleep at a certain time and not staying up all night, things like that. We also ask that you commit to weekly prayer for us, for Brand 316 and its members. Obviously prayer is vital to all of this, so nothing can be done without him. And we are asking for that, so commitment to prayer from all of you would be significant for us. Third and final, if you feel a special calling for this, there's several other ways that we don't need to get into now, but please call me, contact me. If there's any ways that you have a calling, and there's several other ways you and your congregation can help. So please reach out and let's meet up. I've asked Don Davis to close us in prayer and comments if you want. Thank you very much for your time.